Well, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Happy to see all of you today. Well, I can't see anybody, but we are going to go through, and I'm actually making sure that the stream starts doing its thing before I actually get into any of the technical topics for this afternoon. So good stuff. There is a little bit of a delay, so if it looks like my speech is a little off kilter, it's because I'm making sure everything looks good. What is up? What's up, Boom Data and Keanu? I'm not going to attempt to say your last name. I don't want to butcher your last name. Keanu's easy because I know Keanu Reeves. Well, not personally. I know who he is. Hello from France. Well, hello from France. Yeah, good stuff. I don't speak any French. Au revoir? I don't know what that means, but it's like the only word in French I know. Other than there's a couple other ones, but I'd rather not embarrass myself on live internet. What's up, Tom? What's up, Abdullah? Hello from Saudi Arabia. Wow, you're a long ways away from me. Saudi Arabia? That's on the other side of the world. Saudi Arabia. Very cool, man. Very cool. Hopefully everybody's doing well. I have not been to France. I've never been outside of the U.S. The furthest away from the United States I've been is about 25 miles off of the coast of Florida doing some deep sea fishing. And that was a couple of years ago. So that's the furthest I've ever traveled. I've always flown domestically within inside of the U.S. borders. I've never even been over Canada, so I've never been to Alaska or Hawaii either. So, hello from Canada, hello from Dubai. Well, Canada, you're not that far from me. I'm in the upper Midwest, so depending on what part of Canada you're from, if you're Toronto or whatever's directly above like the Chicago, the province that's directly above us, unless you're like East Coast or West Coast. So good stuff there. Dubai. Wow, you guys are a long ways away, which is cool. I'm actually really cool to. It's really cool that you Vancouver. Okay, so Vancouver, you're West Coast if I'm not mistaken. You're over there by like the state of Washington. I was waiting for you since today. Okay, cool. Awesome. Very cool. I'm glad you guys are able to hop in there and hang out with me for a few. So, good stuff. Good stuff. I kind of feel like I need to... This is nothing against you personally, Abdullah, but I've worked with some other... Oh, yeah, you are West Coast. Cool. I've worked with some folks that speak the same way you do, and I kind of feel like I needed just a little grammar correction. So, today morning, tweak that to be this morning. So, swap out today for this. So, same day. So, this morning instead. It's a little bit of a cleanup on your grammar. Other than that, your grammar is really, really good. So, you sound like you would sound like a Westerner if you said it that way. So, no offense to you personally. Just wanted to help you out there a little bit. Windows 10 and Windows Server 2012, huh? Well, I'm not actually going to go through the... I'm going to work on the installation part. So I'm going to show you guys how to get up a couple of Windows PCs, or a Windows host and a Windows server. That's something that I get a lot of questions on. So I feel like we'll be in a good place to go through that here. I'm going to show you guys how to do all that. It's not difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those things where when you start diving into it, it's one of those things where you kind of have to... it's not obvious on how to do it. So I will be taking a look at the Eve documentation and showing you guys how to work with that a little bit better, because that's one thing I get a lot of questions on is, hey, I can't figure out, pardon me, how to make this work, or I get this gets stuck. So I've gotten almost every device that I've ever gotten to work inside of Eve, I've been able to get up and running. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to go through and do. And if you guys have questions along the way, please let me know, and I will answer those to the best of my ability and go from there. So we are going to start off with the documentation first. So I'm going to pull up eveng.net, and we're going to go here, and this is where we're going to focus our time and efforts initially. So we're going to go to documentation and then how-tos. Oh, hey, I'm not even sharing my screen yet. How about that? How about we do this? So we'll do that, and then we will go through the process of getting all this stuff squared away. So you're going to scroll all the way down here to the bottom to create Windows host on Eve and Windows server on Eve, and we'll go through each one individually. So could you tell us a bit about your career journey? Sure. So I think I'll circle back to that question because there will be some moments here where we're going to be basically hurry up and wait as we're waiting for the virtual machine to install. What's up, Joseph? This is perfect as I'm in the process of setting up Windows host so I can test it. Perfect. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get you all squared away. Yeah, but Keanu, I can answer that question for you. Talk a little bit about it, for sure. So we're going to be deploying Windows 10. I have deployed Windows 7 without issue, and it's not difficult to get working. You just have to follow the directions, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a line-by-line of adding the commands that you need to in order to get stuff to work the way that you need it to. So the other thing I want to open up is going to be the supported images and QEMU image namings. This is kind of important because if you don't get the naming convention right, then that will come back to bite you later on. So I'll move those down just a little bit. So one of the first things that it wants you to do is create a directory on the actual host itself. And what's cool about dealing with the Windows platform is most of the operating systems come with a 90-day eval for the desktop images and then 180-day eval for any of the server images. So pretty cool stuff there. So you can go to the Microsoft eval site and download whatever operating system you want, and then you can import it into Eve and adjust the variables from there. So that's basically the easiest way to gain access to the operating systems. I'm not doing anything you guys can't. So I can't say that your internet connectivity will be as fast as mine. I have some pretty quick internet, but you know, the same process applies. You just have to go download it and get it locally on your box. You can tell us your PC specifications. So I don't actually use a PC. I use servers. Currently I have 3 servers deployed. 2 of which are running ES6i 6.5, and I'm sorry, one of them is running 6.5, the other one's running 6.7. So I have an older IBM server that's a 3650 M2 that's running 6.5 because 6.7 is not, the CPUs on the server are too old to support 6.7. So on my IBM server 6.5, I have a Cisco UCS C220 M3 that is running 6.7, and it does really, really well. And then I have another server, another Cisco UCS C220 that is newer CPUs. It's got 256 gigs of RAM on it, and it is I've got Windows Server 2016 installed on that one. And then I run VMware Workstation on top of that. That's my VMware test box. So I can do a lot of VMware testing and things like that. Because one of the things that I plan on doing in the near future is doing a bunch of VMware content, because I'm currently working on upgrading my VCP from 6 to 6.5 and 6.7, depending on which direction I go and stuff like that. So that's basically the heart of the platform. I will show you a little bit about the behind the scenes, but if you go check out some of the older streams, I actually go through and show you specifically what CPUs I'm using and things like that. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a PuTTY connection to this server. So in this case here, I'm going to be physically connecting to this box, which is 10.255 1.41, and I'm going to go in here and 10.255.1.41, go to the port 22, and then it's going to be an SSH connection, and then click on open. I will say yes, I'll accept, and then I will go ahead and log in as root, and then Eve, and now I'm on my server. So that'll get us started in terms of getting everything squared away. Now, when we go through and set this up, it's going to be a combination of doing FileZilla to upload the operating systems, and then using the SSH connection to the server to do some manipulations, like adding hard drives, committing operating systems, and things like that. So pretty straightforward stuff, but it's important to understand the details of how it comes into play and things like that. So first thing that we need to do is I'm going to start off with Windows Server 2012. You don't have to use 2012 specifically. You can use 2016 if you want to. I haven't actually tested it out, but it would be no different. It's the same process. So first thing I'm going to do is on Windows Server, let me go ahead and jump out of the way, is obviously you need to have the operating system already downloaded. And you can use whatever version you want. I'm sorry, not any version, but you can use the eval copy, or if you have a dedicated version of Server 2012 or Server 2016 that you would use to actually license, you can use that. So a couple of things you'd have to do is create a directory on the server, and then you'd have to move to that directory, and then copy the ISO up to there. So I've actually already got most of this stuff done. If we go back to the topology and we right click in here and go to node and scroll all the way down, you can see the Windows Server is actually grayed out, meaning that there is no directory on the server to actually work with. So what we can do is by pulling up FileZilla, I've already got FileZilla already pulled up and connected. So if I come down here a little bit to Windows Server 2012, which is right here, if I click on this guy, I've already downloaded the operating system, and I've already got it in a directory because I've already deployed Server 2012 a few times. So one of the things that you would do is whatever the name of the operating system is, so whatever the file name is, the .iso, rename that to CD-ROM. That's the very first thing that you have to do. Once you've done that, then you can go and copy it from your directory, wherever it might be sitting, to the actual host device. In this case here, let me see if I have enough room to upload this, and I've got 11% disk usage, so we should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to navigate to OPT, then I'm going to grab Unit Lab, then Add-ons, then QEMU, and expand this. And as you can see, I have a number of devices added to this server. So I've got some Firepower, I've got some Nexus 9Ks, got some routers, I got a Windows 10 PC. We'll be taking care of that one here in a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this directory here on the left, and I'm going to just drag it over to the QEMU on the right, and it's going to begin uploading the operating system to the server underneath the directory of Windows Server 2012 R2. Now if I come back over here and I right click and go back to node, you'll notice that Windows Server is now highlighted, which I can click on it. I can't do anything with it yet because, well, I haven't done anything with it yet. I haven't installed it or anything like that. So we're going to wait patiently for it to upload. It won't take terribly long because it is a 6 gig file, I believe, or a 4.5 gig file. So it'll take a couple of minutes for it to upload and that type of stuff. So that will be the main thing. Now, while we're waiting for it to upload, let me go back to Windows 10 and talk a little bit about how this actual stuff works on the back end. What's up, Radic? Long time no see there, buddy. So when you're doing your install of a operating system to a you're installing an operating system that's an eval copy, and your evaluation time frame expires. So let's say it's 90 days. You work with your device for 90 days, and then the evaluation expires. What will end up happening at that point is after an hour or so, the device will actually power itself off. And that's with any eval copy from Windows. You know, you power it on for an hour, and if the license is expired, it'll shut itself back off, which it stays on long enough for you to go through and implement an activation key and then get it activated. So what we're going to do is we need to go in and update this to where this file is no longer here. So we need to get rid of the vert.ioa.qcow2 file. That's the actual file that we're going to create, and we're going to take the ISO file, so the cd-rom.iso, where we're going to copy, or I'm sorry, install the cd-rom ISO onto this particular QCOW2 image, or the QCOW2 file. Think of it like a 40 gig hard drive that just it's been partitioned. It's been there's a volume on it, and it's been formatted for like NTFS, right? In this case here, we're not using those exact same file formats because we're dealing with KVM on Linux, so a little bit different. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete that, which means I'm going to have to rebuild this. So I'm actually going to go over here to Windows 10, and let's do this. We're in the Windows 10 file. I actually need to copy this operating system back up to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy this like so. It's going to copy the file from my server over to my other server. So I have a file server on my home network. So now that that's being copied, that's going to take a little bit to do as well. Now if we go back over here to server 2012 R2, we can see that the CD-ROM ISO is here now. Now I need to go back over here to this guy, and what I need to do is from the command line through my SSH connection, I've actually got to go and create a 60 gig hard drive. So that's where this comes into play, this vert.ioa.qcow2 file. I need to create and format it. So I believe the -F means format. I need to be able to create a new virtual hard disk named vert.ioa.qcow2, because that's what Eve is going to look for in order to boot that particular instance. So I'm going to copy this into my clipboard. I'm going to pull up SSH, and I need to actually go to that directory. So the directory is going to be cd / let me go ahead and move this over so you guys can see it a little bit better, opt unetlab add-ons QEMU, and then ls, and then do a cd to win server 2012 R2. Underneath here, all I have is a CD-ROM. So I'm going to right click inside of here, and that creates the drive. So now I have a vert.ioa.qcow2 file. There's nothing in it right now, so it's basically just an empty disk. So what I get to go do now is go back to the host, or I'm sorry, go back to the workspace, and then I get to right click in here and go to node, and then click on Windows Server, and this is where I would begin the actual spin up of the server. So I'm going to give it 2 CPUs because that is what Eve recommends. If you look right here, it says 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. That's what it recommends for your deployment. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come down here. And this is actually really, really important. I don't know if it mentions it here. Let me go through real quick. I don't see it being specific with this information. No, I don't see it. But basically, one of the things you need to do when you're deploying the image is this QEMU version. Hit the drop down box and then go to 2.4 and then click save. Because if we go over here to the status, you can see the QEMU version is 2.4, right? So this is one of those things where when you're dealing with this, you need to make sure that you're choosing QCOW2. If you're not using QCOW2, I'm sorry, if you're not using QEMU version 2.4, then I found that the implementation doesn't go well. So the boot up process doesn't work and that type of stuff. The other thing you want to do is you want to grab the connector and drag it right to the net and click on save. Now, why do we care about that? Now, I did mention in the, in the post that we would be testing out things like internet as well. I'll come back to how we're doing that, but just so you guys are aware of what's going on, I've actually got this tied to Management Cloud 0, which is actually the same network that I'm using to connect into the server with on this subnet right up here, the 10.255.141. That allows it to connect into my lab environment, my lab subnet, and I'll go from there, which actually gives me internet access. So I'm going to right click on here and go to start, and then I'm going to give that a couple of seconds to boot up, and I'm going to click on this, open up Ultra VNC, and now we're going through the loading files portion. So this is going to take a little bit to build up and stuff like that. What is up, Live with Zeal? I have no idea who you are, but okay. Thanks for joining. But this will take a few minutes to do, and once it comes up, we will then be able to interact with it. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to cover this particular topic, because it's not as straightforward to get running. The documentation on the web, on the E site, is pretty good, but there are a couple things here and there that it misses, and this is just trial and error. So we'll give that a couple of minutes to do its loading of files and all that good stuff. So this will take some time, and hopefully it doesn't bug out on us while we're doing the initial install. Usually it doesn't. As long as you've given it the right amount of resources, the right amount of CPUs, and the right amount of RAM, it usually goes through the steps pretty easily. But, and in case you were wondering, we do need the connectivity to the net, which gives us access to the internet, because the server does need to activate. So we need to be able to reach out to the licensing servers to do all that. So now that we're back here, I'm going to go ahead and click on Next and click on Install Now. And after a couple of moments or so, we should be able to get this process started to where we'll go through the rest of the install steps. This part is kind of slow, but just be patient while we're doing the install. So while we're waiting on that, I am going to go back to Windows host, and via the CLI, I am going to type in, hit the up arrow a couple times, and go back to here, ls. We'll do cd to win-10, and then ls in here. I've uploaded the CD-ROM. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this line of config right here. Copy that and pull up the SSH connection again. And I'm going to paste it in. So it's a 30 gig drive now. And now I have the ability of going back to the server. Let's see if we're any further along. Yes, we are. Cool. So from here, I'm going to click on Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Evaluation Server with a GUI, because I am not a I'm not good with the command line yet. I'm still working on that stuff for the command prompt. I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on Next, and it'll take a couple of seconds to do this. So I'm going to then accept the license terms, click Next, and then I'm going to click on Custom Install. Now, normally at this point, if you're dealing with a normal installation, you would simply need to select the drive. Well, there is no drive. So I need to go to Load Driver, click on Browse, and then come down here to Floppy Disk Drive B, expand this out, then come down to Storage, expand 2003 R2, and click on AMD 64, and then click on OK. And then voila, my 60 gig drive shows up and we're in good shape. I'm going to click on Next, and after a couple of moments we should get a 60 gig drive should show up in our place to install Windows Server 2. And there it goes. So now we're going to click on Next, and it's going to begin the hopefully not terribly long installation process. FSMP 37. So you would be, you're gonna make me go dig this information up, huh? Okay, I will look you up real quick. I know what he's referring to. Let's see. Let's see who you are. Don't tell me. I'll figure it out. Give me a second here. I'm looking it up. Oh! Hold on a second. Hi, Mary. How are you? Good stuff. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. I should have guessed it was you, considering you are kind of incognito-like in that regard. That's cool. Well, I'm glad to see you here. So, Windows 10 is the same process. We're going to grab this guy and go to Edit. And then it's already got the... It's all good, Mary. It's all good. So again, the QEMU version is already squared away. Actually, I need to go ahead and delete this image, or delete this one, because this is a dead image as far as I'm concerned. So if you've got a couple of VMware hosts already in use, if I set the Win host in EVNG, wouldn't it be easier? In a way, yes. Specifically, so that's Tom's question. So, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this that'll make sense. So if I was to take a virtual machine, say, let me pull up this guy and log into it real quick. If I was to attempt to put this, to build a Windows server or the Windows PC or the Windows VM here in ESXi as a virtual machine, and then somehow map it through the net cloud to in here, it would be sort of difficult to eliminate problems that could arise when you're doing something like that. So I have done some stuff in the past like that, and it became difficult to troubleshoot or determine what the actual problem was. So I found it easier to create the host inside, not because there are, how do I put this? It's easier to do it in Windows. It's easier for me to do it in here for a visual representation perspective, because it makes it easier for you to understand the flow versus doing what you're recommending or what your suggestion is. That just makes it things more difficult, in my opinion. So it can be done, but there's that. But it's also to help someone that is having a hard time understanding the flow of what I'm trying to accomplish, so they can actually see what's going on, versus me doing taking a representation. So for example, a virtual PC, for example, and then I connect it to let's see here, a net cloud like this. I'm not sure if this is even going to work. Instead of doing something like this, which I don't believe is going to work. Oh, it will work. Okay. Okay, so it's easy. This, and then adding a node like a switch. Let me just finish adding this in real quick. Instead of doing something like this, that's going to confuse the hell out of people. So rather than do it like this, I find it easier just to build the operating system inside of Eve, and it gives everybody the understanding that that's a Windows PC, it's connected to a switch. And then from there, like, I forget who mentioned ICE, Joe, he mentioned wanting to play with ICE. I can keep ICE out of Eve. Like, I can have it as a dedicated VM, and then I can connect ICE from the outside into Eve. That makes more sense, because then that's a centralized device versus individualized devices. This logic right here is very, very hard to explain. And like, if I explain it now and then somebody pops in their mouse, or they click through the video too fast and they miss that explanation, then they're still confused. Whether if they're seeing something like Windows PC connected into a switch that connected into a router, that makes logical sense for most people. They're able to visualize that, and it clicks with them right away. The one thing that I've learned over time is I can understand the logic to a lot of things, but the average person cannot. They have a hard time visualizing what it is I'm trying to convey, and it makes my job that much more difficult. What's up, Ivo? Thanks for joining. So we're going to go ahead and delete some of these devices. But yeah, Tom, what you're suggesting isn't a bad idea. It's just difficult to explain. That's more or less the problem with it. So let's see where we are in terms of the deployment. And oh wow, we are clipping along pretty good. So we're already done with the install there. So that's exactly what I was looking for. So it's going to go ahead and reboot, and we will be done with the installation process. That went by a lot faster than I thought it would. So let me go over here. No worries. What's up, Ivo? Thanks for stopping by, man, hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and grab another node. I'm going to grab the Windows 10 box and do the exact same thing. So I'll say Win 10, and notice the variables have changed again. So I'm going to give it 2 CPUs, 8192 in RAM, and the QEMU version will be 2.4. Oh, it didn't save. Do that one more time. Win 10. 8 gigs of RAM, and then 2.4 here, and then click on save. And then I'm going to drag and drop it to the net, and then I'm going to right click start, and then once it boots up, click on open this, pull this up, and I'm going to pull up the other one as well. So this process goes by doesn't take terribly long to do. It's just that you have to be patient with it for the most part. No problem, Tom. No problem at all. That's why I'm same bat time, same bat channel next week. So it'll take a little bit of time to get this stuff started, but once it does, we'll be in good shape. And this guy, the Windows server goes by pretty quick. There's not as many touchy-feely things in terms of getting Cortana set up as the Windows 10 PC does. But the cool thing is once they're in place, they work pretty well. But I'm going to take a quick poll. I don't know if I can actually set up a poll in the live stream, but one thing that I'm interested in knowing is if you guys would be interested in having some live streams in the upcoming weeks where we focus on more of stuff that's on the CCNP blueprint for CCNP Enterprise, and going through and talking about maybe a deep dive into BGP over a couple of hour session, doing something like MPLS and DMVPN, things like that. If you guys would be interested in having a couple of live sessions like that, where instead of me individually recording content, I would have the live stream, and I'd also be recording at the same time. I think I can record at the same time. I've never tried it. Where I live stream and I record, and then I'm able to, the live stream you have whenever you want, and then I can take the recording bits and break them up into individual videos, and then you guys can just take advantage of it from there. Because then you guys can ask questions as I'm going along. I'll put some polls out in case you guys are interested in seeing that. Is there a way to clone the Win host, or do you have to go through the install process? So the initial setup you have to go through. There's no way of getting around that. But once you've installed it once, you can have multiple instances of Windows devices out there. So if you want to have multiple Windows 10 PCs in your workspace, and same thing with servers, completely doable. And I'll show you that process here in just a couple of minutes and how that looks. I'm going to go ahead and click on next to get the PC started. So same process as before. And we're waiting for the Windows Server to finish doing its install thing. But have you ever covered 2547 over a DMVPN? I have not. And you're talking about running MPLS over DMVPN is what you're basically doing and using a label. I have not actually ever covered that. So that would be interesting to do. But that's more of a service provider. Well, not technically a service provider thing, but I'm sorry, not specifically for service providers. But I could try. I mean, I'm not against making an attempt. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the Windows Server PC Windows Server a password. So you can give it whatever password you want. I'm just using password with a unique, like that, and then click on Finish to finish its install, and then we are in good shape there. Over here on the Windows 10 PC, we're going to accept the license agreement, click on Next, choose this guy, and again, it doesn't detect the hard drive. So I'm going to go to Load Driver, browse to the driver, and expand floppy disk drive B, expand storage, come down to Server 2003, expand that, open up AMD 64, click on OK. And then the drive will be right there. I'm going to click on Next and go from there. Now on the Windows Server side, since we're waiting for the PC to do its kickoff, I'm going to hit the send the Control-Alt-Delete to it, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. And click Next over here, and then he will be off to the races. So pretty straightforward stuff for both Windows Server 2012 and Windows 10 so far. Okay, so the Windows Server basically tells me the license is expired, which I already knew it would be. Now, one of the things that I have to do on the PC is I have to make sure that there's an IP address that I can give it. So right now, I've reserved 10.255.115. These are IP addresses on my local labbing subnet that are not being used. And same thing with 16. 16 should not be used either. So it is not responding to ping. That's my way of checking to see if an IP is open or not. There's no ping reply. So that means on the server, I'm going to go ahead and give it the IP address of 15, and then we'll be able to gain internet access and stuff like that, which will then transition me over to how internet access comes into play. So I'm sure you guys are curious to know more about that. So I'm going to right click here on the Open Network and Sharing, and then adjust Ethernet, go to the Properties tab, and give it an IP address. And then it's going to be 10.255.1.15/24 to 10.255.1.1, and then quad 8. And click on OK, close, and we should get a little pop-up. Yes, we are, and I'm going to go ahead and close that guy out. I'm going to Start Menu, Charlie Mike Dave for the command prompt, click on him, and then up here I'm going to ping google.com. And yes, I have internet access. So you 100% can give a PC or a server inside of Eve internet access. Let's see how we're doing over here. Okay, so it's the Windows 10 installation is going along pretty well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now talk a little bit about how to gain internet access to your Eve instance, because that's going to be something that you're going to need if you're planning on using evaluation copies of something. This is how you basically are going to accomplish that. So let me go ahead and bust out my pen tool real quick just so that we can talk about it. In case you guys are wondering, I'm sure you guys are. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. So effectively what's happening is I have my switch, right? And let's just pretend this is my layer 3 default gateway, okay? And then it comes down and I have my server. So I'm going to draw this from a top-down perspective. So if you're looking at the server, let's do it this way instead. I have my server, top-down look. This is my IBM server. So it doesn't matter which one you're working with, it's the same thing. And what I did is on the backside of the server, where all of the magic happens, I have a couple of Ethernet ports. So we're going to draw a couple of them just for the ease of illustration. And what I did is I ran a cable from here to here. And this is how I manage the server. So this is given the IP address and stuff like that. And what I did was I deployed a couple of virtual machines. So I'm going to call this Eve1. So I deployed Eve1, and one of the interfaces of Eve1, it's only got one network adapter attached to it currently. I attached that network adapter to the VM net port group inside of ESXi. What that does is it puts it inside of the subnet that I have access to in order to manage the host. So currently that is going to be VMnet 0, or a VM network ties to, there's VLAN 0, or basically VLAN 1. So there's no tagging involved here. So what ends up happening is I map the one adapter on the virtual machine, the Eve instance, to this particular VMnet port group, and that port group has access to the outside network, right? So the way that I manage my host, if I come back over here to this guy, if we look at this, if I go to this guy right here, and I look at if I edit the settings, you'll see that in network adapter 1, I have VM network. VM network, if we go we go cancel out of this and go over here to networking, and I look at VM networking, I am attached to, let me bring this down just a little bit so you guys can see it better. I'm attached to VM network, which is VLAN ID 0. Basically, it's untagged, meaning VLAN 1. And that is in the same, the VM kernel adapter is 10.255.1.41. That's the IP address of the Eve instance. But if I look at go back over here to networking real quick and go to my VM kernel NICs, you can see that the management network is also tied to the management network, which happens to be VMnet 0, because the virtual switch ties all this stuff together. So the virtual switch 0, I've got, let's see here, is it going to tell me? Yes, right here. I have VM network right here, and VM network ties to this is the port group. So basically this is where you put the ports for your virtual machines, goes into a port group. Think of that like a VLAN. And then I have a switch port, or a switch virtual interface, or an SVI, which is a layer 3 interface of 10.255.1.80, which is how I manage the ESXi host. Because this is all tied to the same vSwitch, and it's all tied to the same physical adapter, what ends up happening is I map all this stuff together, and by going to this right here and tying it to Management Cloud 0, it ties all of that together, which inevitably is what allows a virtual machine running inside of Eve to map to Management Cloud 0, basically maps it to the external adapter. So I'm basically bridging the connections together. So for those of you that have dealt with VMware Workstation, you're accomplishing the same goal. If you go into VMnet 0 and you say auto bridging, you're basically allowing connections to pass through the virtual machine running inside of Eve to the adapter that's physically tied to the server out to the internet. That's how everything is coming together. So once that's all in place, I'm able to provide internet access. Now there is an additional connection that's coming out, and this one goes into my storage area network so that I can provide storage to my individual virtual machines so that they're not tied up to dedicated onboard storage. I can deploy a virtual machine on one host, and then let's say I run into a problem or I want to move it because it's going to need more resources than that server can give it, or whatever the case might be. I can actually unregister from one server and then register it in on another. So it gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of the operations and things like that. So that's basically how that comes into play. So I'm able to get internet access to the VMs that way. And it does work, and it works pretty well. So I come back over here. I go through that process, and right now it says the Windows license is expired. No big deal. What I will do is I will go through and I'm going to power off the virtual machine. And when I power off the virtual machine, actually, can I reboot it? I think I can reboot it first. Let me restart real quick. Continue. So you can now ping from your workstation or server outside of your newly created server RAID. Yeah, I mean, those are things that I can do, but I don't need to do print and server. I don't implement those particular services because if I'm dealing with security, I leave all the default Windows security processes in place and I figure out what it is I need to open up. But that's basically how that process comes into play. So it's pretty cool in terms of what you can do. And now by rebooting the server, I should be able to go through the process of getting it to activate, and then once it's activated, I'll be able to basically save the hard drive as it is, and then I'll be able to take that server and deploy multiple copies of it. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-Delete and then log into it again. And so when we log in, the server should be activated. And it is. So the server activated by doing the reboot, and we're valid for 180 days. So now what I get to go do is once it finishes loading up, I will take a couple seconds and then power it down, and I'll show you guys how to commit an image so that it saves whatever's there. Don't know who that is. If they are here, they have not made themselves known. But I'm going to go ahead and go to Start menu, and I'm going to shut down the server. And then we're going to go ahead and I will commit the config. So going back to the server here, if we come down here, we have to navigate a little bit and commit the config. But I'm going to wait till that's done. And then the Windows PC should be just about done. He's still thinking about it. So we have that. Cool. So now the Windows server is down. I'm going to go ahead and come back over here. And what we need to do is we need to figure out what instance I'm looking at and commit that instance. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go to lab details, and the last three of it is 6EA, or 6E8. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to come click on this guy, and then I'm going to navigate to CD, OPT Unet Lab, temp 0, and then from there I will be able to make adjustments. So I'm going to right click and do this. I'm going to do an LS to this guy right here. Actually, let me do a CD to this and do an LS. So let me just make sure that I get the right click on this guy. This is 2. So back on this guy, I will say CD to 2. And then on here, I need to enter this command right here, which is going to be commit the new hard drive. And then paste that in there like that. This will take a couple of minutes to do, usually 10 to 15, depending on what it is you're working with. And then once that's committed, I'll be able to create multiple copies of the server and deploy them wherever I need to. So we'll do the exact same thing once the PC comes online. The PC's almost there. So it's actually gone pretty quick in terms of its operations, but we are in good shape there. But hopefully it doesn't get hung up, and it has done that a few times to me in the past where it'll hang, and you have to power the VM off. Or I'm sorry, power off the device here, power it off, and then power back on, and it'll bring itself back to where it was before, and we'll be able to go through that process. But the commit process, once it's done on the server, we'll be able to deploy it and install whatever we want to. So if we want a file server, we want a domain controller, and a bunch of other stuff, we can 100% pull that type of stuff off inside of the platform. So I'm gonna see. Yeah, I think this guy got stuck. So even if I was to refresh or send Control Delete, I think it hung up. So when this does happen, the simple way to fix this is to close this guy out, right click on it and stop it, and then let it stop. It does take a couple seconds for it to stop. It does not stop right away. And then start it again, and once it goes from gray to blue, open this up, and then it should boot from the hard disk, and hopefully it doesn't give me any problems, because I've had this problem in the past where it does it, and then even with the right amount of resources, it hangs up, and it'll go into it'll attempt to boot, but then it'll fail, but hopefully it'll be okay. Windows 10 can be kind of finicky in here, so you have to be kind of careful with it. So it might take a couple of tries to get it to install. So if it fails once, give it another shot. A reinstall might be needed and stuff like that. What is this? Oh, so let's go check our commit. The commit's still busy doing its thing. Cool, man. I'm glad they're working out for you. You are welcome. They were some level of fun to create. A lot of pulling my hair out trying to get something to work a lot of the time, but you know, that's the nature of learning, right? So, but I'm actually looking at a friend of mine who has asked to remain unidentified, but he knows who he is, sent me a copy of the SD-WAN book. So that was his, I guess, thank you, if you will, for creating the videos. He sent me the book, which I thought was really cool of him. So I was much obliged to get a copy of the book. The book is actually really, really good. Now that I have the book, I've actually got access to, I had already had access to it from the, I have an O'Reilly account and subscription, so I have access to all the Cisco Press. All the Cisco Press, pretty much anything Cisco Press. I have all of that stuff I have access to all of that. So I was already reading through the book a little bit, but I actually ran into, some of the things that I was trying to test out, like service chaining, the zone-based firewall. There was a couple of other things that I tried that did not work out when I was trying to get them to work. So I'm a big proponent of, if I can't get it to work, then it's not going to go in a video. Okay, so I'm actually glad you guys saw this. So because of the fact that the installation failed, or I'm sorry, it hung up, it was getting ready, it was spinning, I actually had to restart the installation process. I had to blow this instance away and restart. So it sucks, but it's the nature of the beast when you're playing around with this stuff in a virtual environment. So I'm going to just close this guy out and power it off and blow it away, and I'll start over again. These things do happen, and it's almost like you do the first try, it fails, you throw it in there a second time, and it comes up no problem. So is the host saved? You modify the server to add DNS services, and then Is that newly created service saved? So I'm waiting for the commit to finish, and it's done now. So I'll circle back to your answer, or to your question here in a second. So if I look over here and I click on this guy and I refresh it, you'll see that there's a vert IOA QCAT2 file, which is the actual installation image, and I have the CD-ROM. I'm going to go ahead and delete the CD-ROM because it's no longer needed. And then I'm going to right-click in here, go to Node, and I'll pull out another Windows server and make sure that I give it the second CPU, and make sure that I adjust it to 2.4 for the QEMU version, and click on Save. Now, to specifically answer your question, they're all individual instances. The only thing that really stays the same is going to be the IP addressing. So, at least in my experience of testing this stuff out. So if I was to power this guy on, just to give you an example of what I mean, what should end up happening is, when I open this up, it should boot up like a normal Windows server, but it'll have the same IP address that this guy did. And they all will. So, but beyond that, I haven't taken it very, very far in terms of what it will do and what it won't do. Like, for example, if you wanted to deploy a server as a domain controller, and then another server is a DNS server, and another server is a DHCP server, you'll have to play with it to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work, or what will carry over from one version to the next. So I honestly don't know. I haven't taken it that far. I wouldn't actually, when I'm labbing stuff up, I'm not actually trying to roll out an entire Windows environment inside of Eve. There are much more efficient ways of doing that through like VMware Workstation. But I understand if you don't have the money to buy a license for Workstation Pro, that you would use this as an alternative. But that's just basically how I do it. But if I was to log into this guy, password is the same. The IP address will remain, and I'll have to adjust that. So it'll the IP address will still be there, and all that type of stuff. And then I'll be able to work with it from there. So we go to Ethernet, and I go to Details. It's got the IP address of 10.255.1.15. So the same IP address the other server had. Things like this you'll have to adjust on a per server basis. But whether this server gets, if I was to deploy DHCP on this guy, and if I deploy another instance, if another server will also have DHCP, I don't know. I haven't tested that out. I've never used the servers to do that level of detail, because I'd rather do that stuff inside of ESXi where it's quicker, and I actually get line rate speeds. And here, a lot of times the server is just there for as an endpoint. I haven't really taken the Windows operational pieces to that level inside of Eve, but hopefully that answers your question. Let me go ahead and delete this guy because I need to reinstall him. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's so the comment was actually the best topology I've seen. I love the MPLS and internet underlay. You work for a large Asian telco. Lots of customers have your topology, just way more sites. A lot of companies that I've worked with have a very similar underlay, overlay infrastructure. A lot of customers I've worked with have internet and MPLS at each site, and we use for internet as a backup, or we use VPN over internet, or whether it's DMVPN or FlexVPN or something along those lines, as a backup to MPLS in the event that BGP takes a crap on us, or the service provider's got a problem in their network somewhere. We have the alternative of, okay, well, this route's no longer available, so we'll just send that particular prefix over, or that site goes down, we can reach it over VPN over the internet. But I've also ran a lot of VPN solutions over both internet and MPLS at the same time. So good stuff. So let me go back to the Windows host real quick. I have to recreate this. It sucks, but it's the nature of the beast. Let me go to CD and then go back to here real quick. CD win-10, and then ls. I'm going to go ahead and from FileZilla, I'm going to delete this guy here because he is not behaving well, and then I'll recreate that. I could try it. And let's go back to here, copy and paste this back in. And do that. Cool, now it's there. I can go ahead and try this again. Windows. Give it the 2 gigs of RAM, or 2 CPUs, 8192 for the RAM, and then 2.4 for the QEMU version. Save that. And now that I'm not trying to do another install at the same time, hopefully everything will work the way that it's supposed to. Alright, so Tom wants me to see if I change the IP address here, if it'll change it on the other server as well when I power it back on. Well, I'll give it a shot. So let me see if 17 is available. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. 17 should be available. Alright, 17 is available. We'll go with 17, click on OK, close, close. Make sure that it took. It took. So we'll power this guy on. We'll see here in a couple of minutes. And let me go ahead and power this guy on. And get this guy started. So there's that. I'm hoping that this install goes by pretty quick because I wanted you guys to see 2 successful installations, but this will take a little bit of time to get the party started. Alright, so let's go ahead and connect into this guy real quick. So let's come over here. And Ethernet. 15 here. So whatever the main instance was, the one that was committed first. So this one was committed first. Its IP address stays for all the following moving forward. But I don't know if that includes things like if you deploy DNS on the server, or if you deploy AD, if you'd have to delete those on other instances. I honestly have not tried that out. But maybe not. I honestly don't know. Be a good test case to find out, but I'm using, when I do my Windows testing, I usually do it in VMware Workstation because it gives me a little bit better, how do I say that? Better performance. Because when I'm labbing, I'm not looking to go slow. I want things to be pretty responsive. But, you know, it is what it is. Good stuff. The last thing, once this thing starts up, is I'll show you guys how to use Wireshark inside of Eve. It's actually pretty straightforward, and stuff like that. You just have to know how to work around some of the issues. I'm kind of hoping it gives me a problem so you guys can see. yeah, I'm a much bigger fan of using VMware for Windows testing. Click next on here, install now. Same process we just ran into. I'm hoping that the install process goes by pretty quick since we're not trying to do 2 installations back to back. I'm wondering if that was part of our problem. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm not terribly worried about it. But, you know, it is what it is. How do they say, que sera, sera? Go ahead and accept the license agreement. Do this. Again, load driver. Browse for the driver. And then expand disk drive B. Expand storage. Expand 2003 R2. Click on AMD 64. And then click next. Alright, click next to there, and we're off to the races. Okay, now that that process is going to kick off, what I will do is, with these 2 guys right here, I'm actually going to power them off. Try to lighten the load on the server while the Windows PC is installing, so that I don't run into problems with it moving forward. Normally I do this anyway. I do 1 installation at a time so that I don't run into any problems like I just did. But for demonstration purposes, it was kind of necessary. But hopefully it'll install pretty quick. The last thing I want to show you guys real quick is going to be, what do you call it? Wireshark. Wireshark is one of those things that I get a lot of questions on in terms of people want to know about it and how it works, and like they're expecting some really complicated process to make Wireshark work. And one of the things that I recommend you guys do when you're on the E website is to go to the download section, which is right here, and scroll to the bottom where you'll have Windows client side, you'll have Apple client side, and Linux client side. I'm a Windows user, if you didn't already know that. What's cool is you download this package installer. What it does is it installs a lot of things that you in different places in order for you to integrate with Eve really easily. So for example, if I need to click on an icon inside of the Eve workspace and I want Secure CRT to pop up or VNC to pop up, I download this integration pack and it automatically makes all the modifications to my PC that I need it to do without me having to do anything. It does it for me. So kind of like it's an executable that you run, and it basically sets all the variables. It goes into the registry and edits makes the necessary registry edits and stuff like that. It makes it really cool and easy to work with that way. And one of the cool things you get to do is if I wanted to capture traffic on a particular interface, I'd right click here and go to capture and grab Ethernet 0, and then it says open Wireshark wrapper. I will, and this time it's going to work. And you can see that it's trying to talk. There's actual communication on my home network that it sees, that it's trying to figure out who's doing what and where. So you can see communication from my home network to other things that are working, and no big deal. But other than that, let's check the install process. It should be clicking along pretty good. Have you used GNS3? I have used GNS3 for a long time. I gave up GNS3 probably, I don't know, 2 years ago? No, it's longer than that. Probably 3 or 4 years ago. Just it's stopped having its usefulness. I was able to, I still use it a little bit in some cases, but I graduated from GNS3 into servers, and I would run virtual machines on an ESXi host, and then I would connect into the server, the virtual machines from there. I still do that for some things, especially if I've got really big topologies, and I don't want to have nested virtualization. In my opinion, EVE-NG blows GNS3 out of the water multiple times over. They can do a lot of the same things. So I don't want you to think that GNS3 sucks, because it doesn't. For example, if you're just getting started in networking and you've maybe reached the CCNA level and you're trying to dive a little bit deeper into other areas, I feel like obviously Cisco Packet Tracer is good for doing CCNA prep. It'll get you over that hump, but once you achieve your CCNA, in my opinion, dump Packet Tracer. It's going to be a complete waste of your time. I'm actually not a fan of Packet Tracer at all for anything even remotely advanced. Jump over to GNS3, play with it, because then you can run it locally on your PC as an application, as long as your PC or laptop has the resources to do it. And it runs really, really well there. And I used GNS3 for a long time, probably 4-5 years. And then when I got to a certain point where GNS3 became, my local computer couldn't handle the workload with GNS3, I put it onto a server and a virtual machine. That worked out well for a while. But then I realized that I was basically trying to do the same thing but in a virtual machine, and I ran into contention issues there. And then I blew away GNS3 and I started using virtual machines, like the OVAs that I'd get from Cisco through like ICE and ASA and routers and stuff like that. I did a lot of that stuff in ESXi. And then I did that for a while, a couple years at least. And then UNL is the predecessor to EVE-NG. I was using that for a while. For a very, very short period of time. I found it incredibly difficult to use initially. It was a steep learning curve to get things to work. And I was like, okay, this is starting to suck. So I went back to GNS3 and doing VMs inside of ESXi, because I was comfortable with the process, and it made labbing things quicker. And then I forget when the actual process changed for me. I played around with Eve a couple of times trying to get things to work, and it didn't. And I grew frustrated with it and just dropped it. But then I played with it a little bit more, and before I knew it, I was like, okay, I finally got a couple images to work. And then from there, it just kind of started blossoming probably 2.5 years ago, and started playing with it more and more heavily. And I like it a lot because it gives me a lot of flexibility to play with a lot of different things. Like, for example, GNS3, I was never able to get Windows hosts in GNS3 to work, at least stable. With inside of Eve, normally I can let it run for weeks on end, and it's no problem at all. It works great. So in terms of stuff like that, I'm looking for stability over anything else, because there are certain things that you can do in Eve that GNS3 just lacks support. But the labbing that I do, GNS3 doesn't really do the job for me anymore. But if you're working on CCNA, or you've got your CCNA and you're working on something higher level like NP or anything along those lines, GNS3 is probably the best way to go, at least initially, because most people don't go out and buy servers right away. They have a pretty beefy machine and they run it locally. And then from there, they go out and they buy something bigger. That would be interesting to see as well. I personally don't know if I would do all that. But one thing that I do plan on covering in the near future, as I go through all my VMware prep, I'm going through 6.5 and 6.7 right now, is I want to go and get ESXi hosts running in Eve. I mean, I've already had them running, let's be clear. But I want to take it a step further. I want to have ESXi hosts that are physically wired to a Cisco switch in Eve, and then I have to do like the port channel on one side, do LACP on the other, have vCenter deployed, roll out all the networking and stuff like that, deal with NSX, deal with VDI. But that's a lot of, there's multiple layers of virtualization there, and I have a feeling that the performance is going to just be terrible. And NSX is already slow as it is when you first start rolling it out, because it's such a beast to roll. And then if you add NSXT, it's even worse. But yeah, I'd be curious to see how that would play out as well. I've got some ideas for some labs that I want to try out and see if they'll work and do some testing. But I'm curious as well to see how that would play. It'd be an interesting proof of concept. I don't know how far you had to lock it down to DoD standards, because I've never worked in a government shop to that level. But if it's anything like dealing with PCIe or PCI and HIPAA, those are hard enough. Having to go through the QSAs and all that type of stuff was a pain. But yeah, other than that, that's how you use Wireshark inside of. And if you guys get an error where it says that it can't, if you don't get this pop up right here where it's pulling the data across, you'll say get like connection terminated or connection rejected or something like that. You have to basically SSH into the host, and then once you SSH into the host, then you'll have the right key, and then you'll be able to start running Wireshark. So I like running Wireshark a lot because it gives me some views into the network, or the views that I normally wouldn't get if you're just to do a debug or whatever. I like to see both. So hopefully our Windows 10 PC will be completely installed here in the next couple of minutes. But I'm being optimistic. But good stuff. But I have been for a while exclusive to Eve, except for a couple of unique use cases where I've ran ICE inside of Eve, and it runs pretty slow. Let's put it that way. It ran like crap. Now that was a while ago, but it did work. It would boot up. I was able to log in, and I was able to do some basic things like MAB and some basic 802.1x. But long term, it was easier to not do that than it was to do that. So I'll just install ICE as a VM in ESXi, and then I'll bring in a net cloud to join the connectivity together and make sure that the Windows or the Cisco switch that I'm connected to has access to the Eve server, and that they can communicate through Radius. But so yeah, good stuff there. So hopefully we're done here in just a couple of minutes. This process does seem to take a while. And as long as the spinny wheel keeps going, we'll be in good shape. This is my hurry up and wait process, because I don't want it to freak out. So I know I asked this question a little bit ago, but I'm going to ask it again because I don't know if any of those people that were here earlier are still here, or if more people have joined, or if we've rotated some folks. But one of the things that I'm looking at doing is doing some live sessions on some of the new CCNP content for DMVPN, MPLS, and SD-WAN. I don't know how much SD-WAN I'll do, but that type of stuff. What memory do you allow Eve to consume on these? I usually give it like 64 gigs. It's never a RAM issue, ever, in Eve. It's always a CPU issue. So the more cores that you can get on your server. So, for example, if you're running like quad core CPU, 2 of them, that's technically 8 CPUs between the cores. When you hyperthread that becomes 16. So you get 16 threads essentially. You can run a decent sized topology with that. I'd say probably 20-25 devices, but you're going to be pegged at nearly 100% CPU. But the RAM is never really a problem. I can run at, I don't know, 40 or 60 gigs. And see, is this topology? This is one that I'm working on right now. And I'm running at 54% CPU and about 8% memory. And you can see the size of the topology. It's pretty big. So this is the topology I'm going to be leveraging in through all the CCNP enterprise stuff that I'm going to be doing. So it's definitely more of a CPU issue than it is a RAM issue. So keep that in mind. There are times when RAM comes into play. For example, when you're doing VMware preparation, you need memory to run VMs inside of VMs and CPU. But those are just things that come into play as you're going along. But let's see where we're at in terms of... We're almost there, I hope. But I have graduated from the quad core to the octa-core, so 8 cores per socket. So it gives me 16 logical CPUs. 16 physical, 16 logical CPUs. And then when you hyperthread, that gives you 32. So my newest server is an 8-core CPU. But the more CPU cores you can gain, so for example, if you can get a 16-core, that's technically 64 threads or 64 vCPUs. So you can run a lot of devices with that one. So pretty cool stuff. Hopefully this will hurry up and we'll be good to go, because I know you guys don't want to sit here and watch paint dry. But that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. I really wanted to get to the point where I have to interact with it, and I think we might be at that point now. I don't know. Hopefully, maybe. Oh, it's rebooting. Maybe this is it. Fingers crossed. You know what? Not everybody's comfortable asking questions, and I get that. And the comments are public, as far as I know. But I'm wondering if I shouldn't come up with some other alternative way of asking questions. But some people have brought up me spinning up a Discord server and doing Discord or a Slack group. And I'm like, well, I'm only against that idea only for the fact that that's a lot of additional administrative work on me. I mean, I could probably get some folks to do some moderation, but I don't know if I'm really ready to do that yet. But I don't know. If you want to learn BGP, we'll definitely cover that in the live sessions. That's one thing that I'm curious to know what people would want to learn in the live sessions, because to me, things like DMVPN, MPLS, BGP, those are the more complicated topics on the blueprint. So I'm thinking that's probably the direction I would go with the live the live sessions on those. And if I'm going to be covering a lot of those topics, that's basically where I would. Yeah, the more I think what'll end up happening is when the topic is way more broad, and a lot going on, the questions will come out. You have a couple of different CCNAs. To be honest with you, if you're, oh, I forgot to do that. So, in my opinion, if you don't go after your CCNP in enterprise, then you're going to struggle a lot when you go into real networking gigs. Because CCNA is like, you know a little bit about a little bit, but you don't know a lot. I would have like, for example, if I was a hiring manager and I was running a decent sized network, being a network guy myself, I would, knowing what, having been through a CCNA, knowing how little I knew as a CCNA, or knowing how little a CCNA knows now, I would have a hard time giving any person a lot of responsibility that only has a CCNA and very little networking experience. I would probably tag you up with somebody more senior that's got deployment experience, and then let you run with a lot of the hands-on stuff and implementation, doing some of the configuration, but the senior person would be in charge of making sure that milestones were met and things were going to work the way that they're supposed to. And that's not to say that the CCNA person couldn't do that. It's, in my experience, folks that have a CCNA are still new to the industry. Now, that's not true across the board, but that's more or less what I've seen. But when you have a deeper understanding technically, then you've touched more and you've dealt with more. And I'm more comfortable with someone that's got a deeper understanding of the technologies, because the moment you hit a wall where you don't know what to do, or you don't know why something's not working, at a CCNA, you're simply limited by what you don't know, and there's no fault in that as a learner. But when you've got a CCNP, you've taken everything you've learned in CCNA and you've gone much deeper, like a lot deeper. So you know OSPF, EIGRP, BGP, DMVPN. You understand MPLS. You've done some some IPsec work. So you're technically and conceptually deeper and stronger than a CCNA would be, and that's the reason why the certification is that much more difficult to earn. I know when I went from CCNA to CCNP, my confidence grew dramatically, and so did my technical capabilities, and that's really where you'd start to discern yourself in the industry. So I'm a big proponent on anyone that's serious about being in IT, specifically networking. Even if you want to go other places, maybe you want to be a security person, or maybe you want to be a wireless person or collaboration, you still need the network at the end of the day, because everything else, security, wireless, collaboration, data center, everything physically connects into the network. So you need a really strong base in order to be able to pivot into other tracks and be successful in those areas. If I didn't have the base that I have, other technology areas, security, collaboration, wireless, they would be much more difficult to work with, because I wouldn't know what I don't know. And that's really that's kind of a crutch. So I rely on my NP and my IE to fill in areas that I don't already, that I would be lacking in. So I'm able to walk into most environments and I'm comfortable with the networking piece, the route switching component, because I already know it. So I absolutely think CCNP is the absolute 100% first place people should go after they've earned a CCNA. Get the CCNP knocked out, and then, because then if you go to work for a shop where you do a lot of VMware, or you work for a shop that does a lot of Microsoft, or you do work for a shop that's got, you're all kind of all over the place, remember, everybody connects into the network, regardless of what it is. Everybody connects into the network to some extent, and the stronger you are in the networking component, the better off you're going to be throughout your entire career. So sure, I can talk a little bit more about my career. My career has been kind of initially it was a whirlwind. I started off in help desk. I didn't beg for my job, but I was competing against probably 5 or 6 other people, and I didn't know what else to. I needed to prove to the hiring person that I was the right choice. And they only had room for one position or one person, and they had a half a dozen candidates. The guy was straight up with me. He goes, "There's 6 of you for one position." He's like, "Why should I hire you?" And I hate that question. I really do. Why do you? There's 2 questions that I really hate being asked as a potential candidate. Number 1 is, why do you want to work for us? Number 2, why should I hire you? Because I'm like that. To me, those questions should be removed from the hiring process altogether, because I just don't think they're good. No other reason beyond that. I am a big proponent in. Let me go ahead and give this a username real quick, and then a quick password. I should not have to tell you why I'm a good candidate. If you can't make that determination on your own based off of the interview that you put me through, the way I'm able to answer questions, and my technical prowess, can I talk the talk? If you ask me questions about how networking works, I should be able to have an open conversation. If like you and I were to start talking about football or baseball or stuff like that, I should be able to handle a conversation technically to that, like it's no big deal. If I'm technical to that level, I should be able to talk comfortably at that level. But it is what it is. I don't like those questions simply for the fact that I feel like they're not fair questions to ask, and I've never really given somebody the answer, well, because I am. I don't know what to tell you other than the fact that I've got this experience, and early on in my career, I was competing with other people for the position, and if I didn't know, it was like, I'm very transparent. If I don't know something, I tell you I don't know something. I can't BS my way through something if I don't know what it is. It's gonna be very obvious that Rob Riker doesn't know something when Rob Riker doesn't know it. And so when I first got into IT, I ended up not getting that job because I said, I don't know what to tell you other than what we've already talked about. So if you're hung up on me, if I'm not already the person you want to bring on, and you're like using an open-ended question to determine whether or not I'm the right pick, I feel like I don't think I'm gonna. That's a very difficult question for me to answer. So, exactly, and that's the thing I don't like. Like I'll be the best employee you ever had, right? And I'm like, I think that's exactly how I worded it. I said, that's kind of a BS answer to me. I'm like, I'll work hard, I'll do my best, but like if I'm not already your pick, I don't know how I'm going to be able to sway you at this point. So it's one of those things where, you just kind of have to play it by ear, and I don't like when people ask those type of. Exactly, Jamal. I honestly do. It's kind of funny when I think I was 18, and I applied to go to work for McDonald's, and one of the final interview questions they asked me was like, "Why do you want to work for McDonald's?" And I chuckled, and it was like one of those things where by the time I got to the interview, I already had a job, so I said, "Well, nobody really wants to work for McDonald's." but you work for McDonald's because you don't have any experience working anywhere else, so you need to gain experience. So you take what you can get, and you stay in the position for however long you stay in that position for. Some folks make it a career. I could not see working at McDonald's for a career for my entire life. He immediately was rejected based off that comment. So, but I didn't care. I've never worked for McDonald's, and I never would. At least as what do you call it? As a working food service specifically. I mean, I might work on the IT side, but that's basically that. Hooray! We have a working implementation of Windows 10. Yay! Round of applause. We finally got through it. All right, so that's so anyway, I got sidetracked in that comment, but let me think here. I did help desk work for about a year ish. I found myself to be a quick learner on those areas, and at least I thought I was anyway. And so what ended up happening was I was in that job for about a year. I did desktop support and help desk. So technically help desk is below desktop support. Help desk is answering the phones and, taking, opening tickets and things like that. Desktop support goes a little bit deeper. They're a little bit more knowledgeable, maybe a few more years of experience under your belt, stuff like that. And then I did both jobs at the same time. So I would not only answer the phone and take trouble tickets, or, somebody would, this computer's not working, and go handle the hardware aspect of it, or reset somebody's password. I would also re-image machines. I was also building operating systems. So I'd open up Windows 7 at the time, and I would add in all the Windows updates and add in all the install packages and stuff like that. So when Windows got deployed, everything popped up on the desktop that it was supposed to be there, that type of stuff. Did that for a while, but I knew I wanted to be a network guy. I knew that. That was my passion, and eventually I switched gears. I went to go to work for a financial services company, where I started off in the NOC, just calling circuits out to telcos, saying, hey, this is not working, da-da-da-da-da, making sure the circuit was tested, things like that. And it worked out for a while, and I got my CCNA shortly after I started working there. I had my CCNP before I started working there. And got my CCNA, was, I guess you could say, promoted, but I was my day-to-day stuff switched from being calling circuits out to the provider to working more with customers. So basically went from level 2 support, or level 1 support, to level 2 support. My title changed too. I went from network analyst 2 to network support engineer 1, which means I'm just working with customers. If they're having a problem, try to work through it, figure it out, that type of stuff. Let me go ahead and pause that moment for the moment. The PC is up now. What I'm going to have to go do is change its IP to, let's make sure that 17 is turned off. Let me try doing, let's do 14. Make sure that's going to respond, or make sure that doesn't respond. I need to get this IP addressed and connected, and it doesn't look like it's going to respond. So we go here and adjust this real quick, get an IP address so I can get the PC activated, and then once it's activated, I'll commit the config like we did before. So open Network and Sharing Center, and then this PC, the Windows PCs do seem to run a little slower than the Windows Server, so just keep that in mind. At least that's my experience with it. And we'll go ahead and 14/24. Oops. 10.255.1.1, and then quad 8 for DNS. And after a moment or so, it should trigger, and it does. And then what will end up happening here in just a couple of minutes is this will go from Windows licenses expired to Windows licenses valid for 90 days or whatever the verbiage is. So, so what ended up happening, I went from analyst to support engineer. I did that for a while. And then about the 1 year mark at that job came around, and they weren't going to convert me to full-time. I was still temporary. So I decided to leave because I had no vacation, I had no benefits. So if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. So I left that. I got another job for a couple of months. I made a very poor choice in moving forward. I took the first available position that came across my desk that paid more and got me benefits and insurance and stuff like that. But once I got that started, I decided to can't remember what happened to that job. I think I quit, something like that. Anyway, that I converted from that position over to another one that paid more, and then I was in that job for a few months. And so after I left the network operations job, I took a short-term job, what do you call it? Like holiday season help. I was there to offset some of just the workload, and then that position kind of fell apart. I don't remember specifically what happened because it's been so long. But then I went over to work for a bank, doing a network refresh, and I was there for a couple of months, and that contract expired because the contract itself was a year. I came in at the very tail end of it, and so right when the contract ended on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday was our very last deployment, I was supposed to start with a new job the following Monday, another contract gig. So I did a lot of contract work in the beginning of my career. Probably the first 2 or 3 years was nothing but contracts. So it was like I'd work for 3 or 4 months, I'd be off for a few weeks, go back to work for a few months, off for a few weeks. So I had a rolling, I had some vacation time, which was nice because then it gave me some time to study, which actually was really nice because every contract was different. So one contract, the first big contract I did was a huge network refresh. So I was ripping out gear and putting new gear in, making sure it was working the way that it was supposed to. So a lot of forklift and turnover there. A lot of experience doing that. We must have ripped out the gear from 30 or 40 banks within a couple of months. So we got a lot of experience doing that, bringing sites up online. And then the next one was doing a lot of LAN work, getting PCs squared away, making sure that they can connect over the VPNs, working with VPNs a little bit. A lot of WAN-related communication. And then trying to think, I went to work for a newspaper for a little while, where I was full-time with them for, 6 months. They were bought out by another larger organization that was going to do away with my position, so I ended up leaving before that happened, and to another contract gig. The next couple of jobs after that were the next 3 or 4 jobs for the next year were all contract. So, and that brought me up to where I was starting to study for my CCIE. But the cool thing about it is with the amount of stuff that I was doing on each contract, there was a lot of Cisco, a lot of networking, so it was a lot of repetitive stuff. So the things that I had done in a previous job, I was able to take all that experience into the next gig and be like, have you ever done this? Yes, I've done this, and this. And they're like, okay, cool. So, but that also elevated my the positions I was in. So I went from being a junior guy to a mid-level engineer to a senior engineer with just a couple of years because I had done a bunch of stuff. So that gave me a lot of latitude in what I had seen and what I had done. And then about that time, I'm trying to think here. I went to work for a consulting firm down in Illinois, and they were like, I'd already taken 2 cracks at the CCIE lab at this point, and failed both attempts. So now I was like I go to my boss and be like, hey, I want to take the lab. He hands me his company credit card and says, okay, book your lab, book your hotel, book your airfare. Just don't spend 10 grand. I'm like, okay. And the lab, I think, was $1,600. So I bought that, and I scheduled it for October 19th, 2015. That's a day I'll never forget, for obvious reasons. So, and that was the very end of September, the very, very beginning of November, or October, excuse me. And I remember going to handing his credit card back to him, and I said, hey, I would like to know if it's okay for me to work a little bit from home, maybe like 1 or 2 days a week, so that I can spend the majority of my time labbing. Because the CCIE was a huge milestone at the time for me, and I felt like I was right there. Like I just needed a little bit of, I needed a final push, and that's exactly what I ended up doing. He told me, because I was brand new to the company, that I didn't have a lot of projects going on, almost none. I was given one project, which was setting up a site-to-site VPN between an ASA and a router. I completely hosed the project because I didn't know anything about ASAs at the time. But I worked with another engineer that did. I did the router VPN, he did the ASA VPN, and it came up with no problem. But I did all that, and then a short time later, so I ended up working from home for the next few weeks. I fly out to North Carolina, take my lab, come home, pass, and then now I've got my CCIE. And that company, there was a hostile takeover, and I ended up leaving a couple of months later because I just couldn't stand the people that were running the organization. But for some reason, this isn't flipping over yet. Normally it does. Let me go ahead and let me restart, see if that helps. But and then we'll commit the config on this one. I did that for a while. I went to go to work. I left that job, went somewhere else, and I ended up doing, what did I do? I did a lot of WAN work with another the following organization I worked at. Did a lot of that. See what else was there. I left that company to go to work, do consulting, and the last like probably 5 or 6 jobs that I've had, is it been that many? Yeah, I've they've been all direct hire. Like I won't do contract. Well, no, that's not true. There was one that was the last job I had was a contract gig, and found out that I did not want to work for the organization, and so it was time to convert between contract and perm, and I told the powers that be that I was not interested in converting, that I was done. The contract was over, I was done. I was moving on. There was a lot of conflict with the managerial staff. Just were not, their expectations versus the reality were really skewed. They were expecting lots and lots of work to come out, and it's like, but they wanted no downtime. And I'm like, well, kind of hard to do both. But anyway, and then with the current job that I'm in now, I'm full-time instructor, so can't complain. So let me read through some of the comments to see if there's anything interesting. How do you make sure that you don't forget anything? Well, the easiest way to not forget stuff is to keep rehashing it over and over and over again. Don't let it fall by the wayside. Keep bringing that stuff up and keep hammering it. Even though I'm a route switch guy, there's no lab that I'll ever create that doesn't have some layer 2 and layer 3 networking in it, just to keep those skills fresh. Yeah, I agree with Tom. It's a part of life. There will be things that you won't remember. There's lots of little details about stuff that I forget, but that's why you take lots and lots of notes. So you always have your notes to fall back on. I'm a huge note taker. But it's part of the nature. When it comes to the forgetting basic stuff for routing and switching stuff, maybe it's time for you to pause your security stuff for a little bit, circle back to the routing and switching stuff to get it to where you're not forgetting basic stuff. And that's really what the but it's inevitable. You're going to lose some knowledge and some understanding. I mean, it's impossible for someone to expect you to remember everything you've ever learned and be consistent at it, because I'm not. I mean, I won't spin up, like, I can't right now. If I wanted to do a deep dive on EIGRP, I probably know it to the CCNP level, right off the top of my head. There are things that I don't remember specifically, like the feasibility condition. I would have to, like, I know it prevents loops, but how it actually does a calculation and, you know, the finite details to it, I don't remember. I'd have to go look it up. I had to do like a couple of labs on it to refresh myself on what it is and how to verify some things and stuff like that. Unless you do it day in and day out to a certain depth, like NP or above, I don't remember all the little details. It's not expected for someone like it's not a realistic expectation for anybody to remember all the details about something. It's just not. That's why we take notes. We barely do any routing switching as the network is working. So in a situation like that, you need to just spin up some labs, like Keanu mentioned. You just have to spin up some labs and just go through them. That's what I do. I intentionally add in some level of layer 2 and layer 3 networking simply for the fact that I need to have it there in order to do my day in and day out job. So you're going to have to add it in just adds it in. So for example, if I was to give you a lab, this is one of the things that I tell a lot of my students to do, is build a lab like this, which is going to force you to do layer 2 and layer 3 networking. So I take a couple of switches, right? And I bring them together and I do some sort of port channel between the two. Then I have R1, I have R3, R4, and I have R2 sitting over here. They get wired into the network like so. And then I can add in like R5 and R6. And I have R5 connects over here, R6 connects over here. So I'm forced to get the VLANs to work, the trunking to work, the spanning tree protocol to work if I'm going to do more than one connection. And if you want to make that more difficult, add in another switch. Do something like this. And then do more port channels. And then choose your root bridge and then have like R7 and R8 sitting here and wire them together. Do a simple lab like this and it'll definitely become more and more and then you can add in your firewall behind here. So you have a firewall, and then maybe you add another, PC1 or whatever the case might be. Take a core CCNP level tasks that you want to stay strong in, and bring those into play with whatever networking you're doing, and incorporate those additional features and capabilities into your current labs. Because this way here, you're going to consistently stay strong as you're going along, and there will be areas that you're not going to be strong in. That's just the nature of the beast. In a job where we were doing advanced IPsec all day, IP2 Flex VPN route-based, policy-based, DMVPN. Well, that's cool. I mean, you're diving into the more advanced technologies. Small shop where we had 80 layer 2 networking. Yeah, I mean, there will be situations where you work in environments where you're doing a lot of different things. And now you do MPLS, ISIS, BGP. Yeah, it's one of those things where as you're going along, you're just going to have to spend time bringing in additional technologies and capabilities and playing with them to keep them strong. Like, I could probably get FlexVPN to work off the top of my head, but it would look like I don't know what I'm doing. If I wanted to teach it, I'd have to go and do some labs to get myself familiar with everything again and to bring that level of understanding up again to where it was when I first started going through it. But I wouldn't be confident in doing a deep dive into it and breaking down all the little details. I've covered it to a certain extent, but I haven't done a super, super deep dive on it. But I don't know any CCIE that's got one or more CCIEs. Nobody that I know personally. And I know a lot of CCIEs that can come off the... they can go from... They can teach any technology in depth across all the tracks that they're a CCIE in to the CCA level. Nobody I know can do that. It's an unrealistic expectation because there are gonna be areas that you are really, really, really well versed in. I spend a lot of time on MPLS VPNs. I spent a lot of time on DMVPN and IPsec VPN because it was part of my job. I had to know that stuff inside and out, and I was really good at it. But there are other areas where I'm like, I would struggle to do EIGRP stub route leaking because I think I've covered it maybe a dozen times in my entire career. It's not something I'm super comfortable doing. I'd have to go like, okay, how do I do this? Look up some documentation and configure it. Like, oh, I know what it's trying to accomplish. Like the theory's there, but the actual implementation, it would look like dog doo-doo if I was to try to do it right now. Because it's just like, okay, I know I have to configure this, configure that, what the actual order of operations are on the steps. I wouldn't know. I'd have to go look it up first. But that's the expectation, right? You can't know everything all the time. Cool, man. Appreciate that, Anis. What are your thoughts on automation in Python? Are you diving into that? No, I am not. I have absolutely no anticipation or desire to dive into either one of those. I personally, no. I don't want to bash on them either, but it's not something I have any interest in touching right now. It's maybe from an operations perspective, using those to verify things, maybe an automation script to do a bunch of show commands, maybe. But long term, I don't know, maybe. I'm sure there will be something that comes along. I know when I go to tackle the security CCIE at some point in the future, whenever the labs open back up again, I'll have to learn it to some extent. But then they're forcing my hand at that point, and I'll learn what I need to learn. I just haven't been exposed to it enough, and to me, it's like there's nothing I do in my day-to-day job that requires me to automate anything. So, let's see. Any plan for QoS and automation videos? No automation videos right now. Maybe some QoS. I don't know. I'd have to spend some time on QoS, but I could probably come up with something. Knowing where to go look up stuff. Yes, I agree with you on that one 100%. There's always going to be the task of being able to find information is invaluable. What do you think about do you think CCA still has value? 100% it has value. Anybody that will tell you that the certification is not worth it, or the CCIE is not worth it, or CCNP is not worth it, they don't know what they're talking about. If they have a CCIE and tell you CCIE is not worth it, they're probably not doing anything CCIE related. They're probably a manager or not doing anything technical. Most of the CCIEs that I know that do that, they're not doing CCIE work anymore. CCIE work meaning they're not doing deployments. So they're not being tasked with doing that type of stuff. I can tell you right now, I had to work my ass off for 3 years to earn it. I will never let it go. And it's the top accomplishment that I have in the industry, in my career so far. So I will absolutely defend it because I know what it took to earn, and it was just as much of a sacrifice for my kids and my family as it was for me to spend the time doing it. So it's it's a huge endeavor. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're talking out their wazoo and they don't know what they're talking about. But that's my opinion. I will. If anybody asks me if it's worth going after, I'll tell you 100% it's worth going after. But it's a 100% commitment as well. You can't be half in and half out. So, but I was committed from day one when I started going after it and knew what it would take. The concept of eating an elephant, it's you eat it first. You got to kill it, then you got to start eating it one bite at a time. So, thought you were going for service provider. Have you seen a new service provider lab? That thing is ridiculous. Holy cow! I saw a webinar on that thing, and they're talking like 50 devices and all kinds of advanced segment routing and XRV 9Ks and like 50 boxes and several terabytes of RAM. I don't work for a service provider. I don't do any service provider work, so it would be a complete waste of my time to go after that. Have you dealt with large config changes across many devices? I have. I did a 5,000 device QoS deployment about 6 years ago, and I used SolarWinds Configuration Manager to do that. And I basically built a text-based script that Config Manager would grab and then push via SSH connections down to all the devices. So, to my understanding, no different than like Python would do it. I mean, I've never worked with Python, so if I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, it's because I don't. But as far as I know, those automation tools, they have to connect to the network device somehow, whether it's through CCNP push, through a read-write string, or through an SSH connection. That config's got to get pushed somehow. And that's basically what I ended up doing. It took a while, but it also allowed me to verify it. It's like the biggest one I've ever done I can think of. I've done multi-hundred ones where I've just had secure CRT open and I'll open up like 50 tabs and I'll connect to all I'll connect to all, and then if I'm doing the same config over and over and over again, like the same ACL that I need to match on, I'll go ahead and just dump it in. But each deployment's a little bit different. Let's see. Especially since the courses are often being refreshed so they are up to date certification. Yeah. It's one of those things where certification is in and of itself a necessary evil. I've worked with guys that don't have certifications at all. They've been in the job for a number of years. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a certification is going to be, unless you work for a, what do you call it? If you work for a company and not a consulting firm, then oftentimes certification is not going to make a hill of beans difference between for the company. Certifications usually come into play is working for a Cisco partner or a value-added reseller, like a VAR, where you need a certain amount of people to be certified to a certain level in order to get the discounts that you need. So that's why certification is a big push there. If you work for a company like, I don't know, Chase Bank or Home Shopping Network or I'm trying to think of like Halloween Express. You work for any company directly as a customer engineer, they're probably not going to give a crap if you have a CCIE or 2 CCNPs. They're not going to care. Can you do the job? The certification is there just to do that. It's to get you the interview, and it's your technical understanding of what's going on, what you've learned, is how you're able to articulate what you know what's going on. Maybe they have you do some tests, but more often than not, CCNA and CCNP, you guys are going to get pushed through the ringer when it comes to technical interviews because you're CCNAs and CCNPs. I've had a CCIE for 5 years now, and I can't remember having a real technical interview because I can talk to like if somebody asks me a question about something, I can throw it up on the whiteboard and I can walk them through how everything works. But then again, most people don't know the technologies to the level that CCIEs do. So therefore, a lot of times, the people you're interviewing with aren't as technical as you are. So your interviews aren't going to be as big. It's more like it's a culture fit. Is Rob the right guy for this job? That type of stuff. So that's basically where that comes into play. But the the certification in and of itself is just there to help determine whether or not it's like what's the word? It's a keyword, right? You know, do we want to bring, let's say Anis and Keanu both have CCIEs, and the job that they're hiring for is heavy on the security side, but Anis has a data center CCIE and Keanu has a security CCIE. You both have CCIEs, but Keanu is going to be the better fit for the position. So Keanu would get the job, right? That doesn't mean Anis couldn't do it, but you know, you're trying to fit a square peg in a square hole. You know, you got to line the people up to where they're going to be a good fit. So a lot of that type of stuff comes into play. But sounds pretty similar to Python connected devices via like SSH and push the config. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways of accomplishing it. I just personally haven't had to use an automation tool in order to do that. Do you expect the modern networks to be mainly dependent on SDN? No, I do not. I feel I'm thinking that the way that it's going to go over the next 5 to 10 years is there's going to be a transition for some things to be managed through a GUI like SDN, SD-WAN using vManage, SD-Access using DNAC, Palo Alto firewall deployments being managed through Panorama. I mean, there's a bunch of different options that are out there, but the reality of it is, I don't see organizations replacing their infrastructure with GUI-based solutions. I just don't see it. Because at the end of the day, you still have to know what's going on. If your vEdge, for example, isn't forming a IPsec tunnel to another vEdge, you probably have an underlay problem somewhere, and you need to figure that out. But it's one of those things where you have to, number one, understand the problem first, and then know how to resolve it. So SDN isn't, no organization should be dependent on SDN technologies. The thing that I want everyone to understand is those software-defined services, SD-WAN, SD-Access, stuff like that, ACI, NSX, things like that, VDI, those are technologies that have been developed to help an organization do a better job of deploying the networks in order to make the businesses be profitable. So the one thing that I in no disrespect to Hannon on the question, but if you're pushing your configuration or pushing your network to meet what some senior person in the organization is saying that we need to go to, is that solution going to meet to benefit the company? Or are you just implementing it to implementing it? But that's just my take on it. I don't see it being, if an organization shouldn't be dependent on a singular technology or a singular direction on how to get something working. You should be deploying solutions to make the business profitable, sustainable, and resilient to issues that do pop up. It shouldn't be you shouldn't have a solution and you're looking for a problem to, or how does it work? Is it you have a problem and you're looking for a fix? No, it's the other way around. You don't have a fix and you're looking for a problem to throw at it. You know, you're not trying to do that. You're trying to apply technologies to benefit the business. If you're doing that, then that's the right mentality to go at it. Yeah, so first question is eVPN and VXLAN. They are on my hit list. Will eventually get there. I just don't know when. I would like to. I've got Nexus 9Ks. I've done a little bit with it, but I don't feel comfortable. I wouldn't feel comfortable teaching it right now. I need to be better at it than I am now. At the end of the day, you need expert to troubleshoot. You need to be well versed in the technology. I don't necessarily want to say you'd have to be an expert, but you have to know what's going on. It's one of my jiu-jitsu instructors says it best. A problem well understood is already half solved. Because you know what the problem is, and you know the direction to go in to fix it. If you don't know what the problem is, you don't know what to do to fix it. So if you're using a SDN technology, let's say, for example, you're looking in DNA Center and some user calls up and says, hey, I had a problem with my laptop Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and it's now Friday at 5. Just want to let you know, I forgot to mention to it earlier, you can go look through the network DVR and say, oh yeah, there was a lot of issues in that part of the network, and I see why the access point was having a lot of issues. But that's one of those things where you're able to look back and make a determination based off of telemetry data. But if you're having a current problem where internet connectivity at a location isn't working, therefore your IPsec tunnels at your SD edge isn't working, the SD edge isn't the problem. It's the internet circuit. And you need to be able to differentiate between device problem and technology issue and be able to figure that out. Because, for example, if you try making a phone call from HQ to a branch office and the phone call won't go through, and you're thinking it's a call manager problem, the phone's not registered, well, a lot of things need to be in place in order for that phone to register to call manager. If the VPN connection from that branch to the call manager server is down, then that connection is never going to get made. So maybe you've got DMVPN and you're doing IPsec over the top of that, and IPsec's having a problem because, I don't know, maybe somebody changed a pre-shared key somewhere, or the internet circuit's down, or any number of other potential problems. You need to be able to figure out in the multiple layers that are used to build the network which layer is problematic, identify the problematic issue in that layer, and then resolve it. If you can do that, then to me you have achieved network understanding. Be able to split all those logical layers apart, isolate which particular feature is the problem, fix that feature, and then get the network back up and running. So those are the type of things that come into play that I look at. I look at the network as a layer cake, and I troubleshoot it as such. If I can't if a user calls up and says they can't get to the internet, I know there's probably a half a dozen things that I'm going to be looking at. VLANs, trunking, spanning tree, or not spanning tree, but VLANs, trunking, subinterface, layer 3, SPI, NAT, ACL. But which CCIE certificate is the most requested in the world? I have no idea. I could only speculate. I would personally say that enterprise infrastructure is the most popular, or routing and switching is the most popular. It's probably the easiest to get as well. Well, routing and switching was easy to get. I shouldn't say it that way because it wasn't easy to earn. But you got to remember, for routing and switching, it was learning one operating system, iOS, on a router and a switch, and then learning how layer 2 and layer 3 networking came together. If you're dealing with a service provider, you're dealing with a minimum of 2 operating systems. When you're dealing with security, you're dealing with like 6 or 7 operating systems. So in terms of other tracks, routing and switching was not as difficult to earn. You learn one platform, you learn as well as you need to, boom, you pass. It is what it is. But other than that, anyway, we are going on, we're a little over 2 hours now. I just realized that we had crossed the 2 hour mark, and all that good stuff. So I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in this session. I'm going to put a poll out probably as soon as I'm done with the live stream on whether or not you guys want to see live stuff. And actually, since I'm at the end of the session, the live session, let me turn on and start recording. Hey, it's recording as well. That's cool, because now I want to see, I should be able to record and stream at the same time. So we'll have the live stream, right? And then I'll be able to record the live stream locally and then chop it up into individual videos, because then you guys can ask questions. We love talking to... You know what? I'm okay with that. So what I'll do in the near future is we'll spin up some topics that we'll go into discussions on. You guys can hop on, talk, ask questions. We can have some interaction. You guys can ask some questions on, anything you're not sure on. We'll cover things like MPLS, DMBPN, BGP, some of the more advanced technologies. I started doing EIGRP. I'm done with RIP. I did cover that. Yes, I know RIP. You're like, RIP? Really? Yes, I covered RIP. But I think that'll be a good transition point for us, would be to start with like OSPF or BGP and do a series of live streams, probably a couple times a week till we get through it, and then I will chop up the recordings into individual videos instead of doing pre-recorded and then I'm just covering the content. Maybe I don't do a good job explaining it to you. You can ask questions and I can answer them live and go through there. I think that'd be cool to do. So changing it up a little bit. So I'll put out a poll of what we should do. So it's going to be probably OSPF, BGP, MPLS, DMBPN, multicast, QoS. We'll come up with a few and stuff like that. Good stuff. We want love. It's BGP when they started. Cool. Yeah, I'm thinking that the more topics we cover live, the better off we'll be. Traffic engineering too. Yeah, like, what's specifically traffic engineering? MPLS traffic engineering? Or did you mean like BGP traffic engineering? But we can cover a lot of those topics live. I think that would be a good transition point, because then you guys will be able to jump on and ask questions and give your feedback and stuff like that. I think it'd be kind of cool to do those type of things. So yeah, good stuff. I'm going to ask the question in the chat. MPLS, okay. MPLS and BGP, okay. We probably could do both. I mean, I would have to change my topology a little bit if we were to do that. I need to add additional links in here for MPLS. But I just realized that MPLS traffic engineering is not on the enterprise infrastructure topic list. It's a service provider specific technology. So, or I should say use case. But BGP traffic engineering, yeah, I could totally see us doing that. We will be covering that a lot. But working with confederations, working with route reflection, a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of that type of stuff as we go forward. But I figure live streams would probably be the best way to handle that, because then you guys can ask questions and I can whiteboard the way through that and stuff like that. Cool. Well, I'm glad you guys were able to come hang out with me in this session. I do appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me. I'm going to make mention of it now. I forgot to make any goodies for people who join live. You get me live and you get to ask questions. One thing that you can do is, if you join the membership, I'm going to be building labs, so you get access to a Google Drive. I'll be building labs as Google Docs, and I'll be like, okay, do execute this, and this. And then there'll be a video solution for it. So I will, since we're looking at doing live sessions, we'll go through and I'll create some labs ahead of time of what we're going to cover and go from there. But definitely check the any of the topologies that I create, any of the pre-config or the initial configurations will be available through the membership and stuff like that. But that's basically where I'm gonna go with it. So you'll gain access to all that type of stuff initially, and be able to hang out with me for a couple of hours and then all that good stuff. Cool, man. I appreciate that. Is it locked me? I don't know how to say that. Lachumai? Maybe I don't know. I feel like I'm stretching for that one. No worries, Tom. It's all good. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and kill the stream, and I will see all of you same bat time, same bat channel on. Well, I don't know, Sunday. If there, I may have to switch it to Saturday next week because of some other commitments that I have. But I will. I'll let you know ahead of time, and I'll put out a link for the date and time. But I think next week we're going to start diving into individual technology. We'll start with like OSPF, and we'll do a lot. Our next live stream will be actual CCNP stuff, where we'll dive into like how the protocols work and that type of stuff. So that's basically where I think I'm going to go with it. So at any rate, so spread the word. For those of you that think somebody might take advantage of it, I'll be doing some CCNP level stuff on that as we move forward. And I will catch all of you next, probably going to be Saturday. But I have to double check with the wife, make sure that for a couple of hours on a Saturday. Hey, if you're going to be partying, hey, it's fine with me, man. I don't know if I'll be, what day is Halloween? Saturday. Yeah, I'll figure out something for Saturday. Maybe Saturday evening for a couple of hours. But so yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna bug out and go do some other stuff, and I will see all of you next week. But I'll put a post out on that stuff probably tomorrow or the following day once I figure out what I'm gonna do. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with me, and I will catch all of you in the next stream. Adios.